I never imagined my own son would hurt me. Blood trickled down my face as I lay crumpled on my living room floor, trying to process what had just happened. Thomas stood over me, his face contorted with rage, his fist still clenched. He had punched me, his own mother. My ribs throbbed where his foot had connected moments before. All because I told him I couldn't give him $40,000 for his wedding. All because I simply didn't have it. What Thomas didn't know as he stormed out of my house was that the security cameras were recording everything, and that this moment would change both our lives forever. I gave everything to raise Thomas after his father Jack died. 20 years ago, when Thomas was just 12, Jack had a sudden heart attack while coaching Thomas at baseball practice. One moment he was cheering our son as he ran to home plate. The next he was gone. Thomas witnessed it all. The trauma bonded us even closer as we navigated grief together. After Jack died, I worked 3 jobs to keep our modest home and provide for Thomas. Weekdays, I was a school secretary. Evenings, I waitressed at the local diner. Weekends, I did bookkeeping for small businesses. Sleep became a luxury as I juggled it all, but seeing Thomas grow into a confident, kind young man made every sacrifice worthwhile. Thomas had always been a sensitive, thoughtful boy. When other teens were giving their parents attitude, Thomas would leave handwritten thank you notes on my pillow. When I came home exhausted after double shifts, he'd have dinner waiting, even if it was just grilled cheese sandwiches. For his 16th birthday, instead of asking for a car like his friends, he asked for SAT prep classes. College was his ticket out of our small town, he said. He wanted to make me proud. And proud I was when he earned a partial scholarship to state. I took out a second mortgage on our home to cover the rest, never telling Thomas how close to financial ruin we came. Those were lean years. I ate a lot of ramen noodles while telling Thomas I was on a new diet. I never let him know I sometimes skipped meals entirely. What mattered was that he had opportunities his father and I never had. After graduation, Thomas landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in the city, about an hour away. I finally felt I could breathe. My boy had made it. He called me every Sunday without fail. He drove home monthly for weekend visits. Even as his career advanced and he became busier, he remained thoughtful and grateful. Then he met Stephanie. I still remember the day he first mentioned her. It was during our weekly call, and something in his voice changed when he spoke her name. They had met at a corporate event for her father's investment firm. She worked in public relations and came from what Thomas called old money. From the beginning, I was happy that Thomas had found someone special, though I worried about the different worlds they came from. The first time I met Stephanie, I noticed she wore shoes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was striking rather than pretty tall. Sleek, perfectly polished. She had an easy confidence that came from never having to worry about paying bills. She was polite, if slightly distant, during that first visit. Thomas seemed eager for my approval, his eyes constantly darting between us. Within 6 months of dating Stephanie, Thomas started changing in subtle ways. His calls became less frequent. His visits home dwindled. When he did visit, he made comments about my furniture being outdated and my house needing renovations. Once, he actually winced when I served dinner on the mismatched plates I'd collected over years. When I visited Thomas in the city, I was shocked by his new apartment with its designer furniture and breathtaking view. On a marketing executive's salary, it seemed impossible. He brushed off my concerns, saying he'd gotten a substantial raise. I later learned from his roommate that Stephanie had convinced Thomas to upgrade to impress her friends, despite his rent now consuming over half his monthly income. Other changes followed. Thomas, who had always driven sensible cars, suddenly showed up in a luxury sedan. His wardrobe transformed from business casual to custom tailored. When I complimented his new watch, he casually mentioned it was a $10,000 gift from Stephanie for their 1-year anniversary. I tried to be happy for him, but alarm bells were ringing. One Saturday afternoon, about 1.5 years into their relationship, Thomas called asking for a favor. His voice had that tight quality it got when he was stressed. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you loan me $3,000? Just until my next bonus." "Of course," Id responded automatically. "Is everything okay?" "Just some unexpected expenses." Stephanie's birthday dinner cost more than I planned. The long silence that followed spoke volumes. I wired him the money that day, but something felt wrong. What I didn't know then What I would only discover much later was that Thomas had accumulated over $70,000 in credit card debt, trying to maintain the lifestyle he thought necessary to be with Stephanie. Had been making minimum payments while the interest compounded. Had opened new cards to pay off old ones. Had been hiding his financial disaster from everyone, including Stephanie herself. My son, who once prided himself on his independence and responsibility, was drowning in debt while creating an illusion of wealth. And I had no idea how much worse things would get. The call came on a Tuesday evening in April. I was watering my small garden of tomatoes and basil when Thomas's name flashed on my phone screen. "Mom," she said yes. His voice burst through the speaker, more animated than I'd heard in months. My heart leapt. "Who said yes to what?" I asked, though I already suspected. "Stephanie! We're engaged!" I proposed last night at Carmichael's. He sounded breathless with excitement. I sat down on my porch steps, a mixture of emotions washing over me. Joy at his happiness, certainly, but also apprehension. I asked, "When are you bringing her to visit?" "I'd love to celebrate with both of you." Thomas paused. "Actually, we're free this weekend. We want to talk about wedding plans with you." I spent 3 days preparing for their visit. I cleaned every corner of my modest 3-bedroom ranch home, knowing Stephanie's critical eye would miss nothing. I splurged on ingredients for a special dinner roast beef, Thomas's childhood favorite, with garlic mashed potatoes and homemade apple pie for dessert. I even bought a bottle of expensive champagne to toast their engagement, though it meant cutting back on groceries for the week. When they arrived Saturday afternoon, Stephanie immediately extended her left hand, showcasing a diamond ring that caught the light in blinding flashes. 3 carats, princess-cut platinum band, she announced before I could even congratulate them. From Tiffany, of course. Thomas beamed beside her. "Isn't it perfect, Mom?" "Just like her." I hugged them both, noticing how Thomas was watching Stephanie for approval rather than sharing in my genuine joy. During dinner, Stephanie picked at her food while dominating the conversation with wedding plans. While Thomas and I had always been savers, Stephanie spoke of money as if it were unlimited. "The Langham has the best ballroom in the city," she explained between tiny bites. "They're holding the date for us, but we need to put down a deposit of $20,000 by next week to secure it." I nearly choked on my water. $20,000 as just a deposit? Thomas jumped in. "It's the premier wedding venue, Mom. All the society weddings happen there." I wondered when my son had started caring about society weddings, but I smiled and asked about their other plans. Stephanie warmed to her subject. 8 bridesmaids, each with custom gowns. A 12-piece orchestra for the ceremony, transitioning to the city's top DJ for the reception. Hand-calligraphed invitations for 300 guests. A weekend in wine country for the wedding party before the big day. With each detail, my anxiety grew. Finally, I had to ask, "This sounds lovely, but have you set a budget for all this?" Stephanie looked at me as if I'd suggested they get married at the courthouse. "Around $120,000. Standard for a wedding of this caliber." I couldn't hide my shock. "That's more than my house is worth," I blurted. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Stephanie's expression tightened. Thomas, clearly uncomfortable, said, "Mom, this is the most important day of our lives. We want it to be perfect." I took a deep breath. "Of course you do, sweetheart. I'm just concerned about starting your marriage with such a financial burden." "Daddy is covering most of it," Stephanie interjected, twisting her massive ring. "He's giving us $60,000. Thomas and I are contributing $20,000. She paused, her gaze fixing on me. And as the mother of the groom, the traditional contribution would be $40,000. The room started spinning. $40,000? The number echoed in my head. Thomas reached for my hand across the table. "We know it's a lot, Mom, but it's customary, and you've always said you'd help with my wedding someday." I pulled my hand away, trying to gather my thoughts. "Thomas, when I said that, I was thinking of a few $1,000s, maybe $5,000 at most. I live on a fixed income now. I have my pension from the school district, but it's modest." Stephanie's lips pursed. "Surely you have savings? Investments?" I felt cornered. "I do have savings, about $43,000. It's everything I've managed to set aside for my remaining years. I can't just—" But before I could finish, Stephanie cut in. "So you do have it." she smiled triumphantly. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to acknowledge the impossibility of their request. Instead, he leaned forward with an expression I'd never seen before, something calculating. "Mom, what about a reverse mortgage on the house? Or you could sell it and downsize to something more, appropriate for a woman your age. Maybe a retirement community?" His words struck me like physical blows. The house had grown up in, where Wed weathered the storm of his father's death together, where every corner held memories Wed both cherished. He was suggesting I sell it for a one-day celebration. "Thomas, this is my home, and that money is all I have for medical emergencies, for care if I become ill. I can't give it to you." I watched my son's face transform. The loving boy I raised disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. He turned to Stephanie with an ugly smile. "See? I told you she'd be like this." "Embarrassingly stingy," he said, loud enough to ensure I heard every word. Stephanie nodded sympathetically, patting his hand as if he were the victim. "That's why Daddy wanted to meet her first before committing to the full amount. He had concerns about where you came from. They spoke about me as if I wasn't there, as if I was a disappointment to be managed." I sat stunned, my homemade pie untouched on the sideboard, the champagne warming forgotten. By the time they left that evening with barely a goodbye, I felt hollowed out. The son who once left thank you notes on my pillow had called me stingy for not bankrupting myself for his wedding. The child I had sacrificed everything for now saw me as nothing but a checkbook that had disappointed him. I stood in my kitchen among the dirty dishes, wondering where it'd gone wrong and how things had fallen apart so completely. After Thomas and Stephanie left, I fell into a deep depression. I called in sick to my volunteer position at the community center. I let the phone ring unanswered. I barely ate. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of Thomas as a small boy, asking why I didn't love him enough. My best friend Laura tried reaching me for days. We had met 30 years ago when our sons were in kindergarten together, and she'd been my rock through Jack's death and the difficult years that followed. After a week of my avoiding her calls, she showed up at my door with grocery bags and a determined expression. "Emily Parker, I know you're in there," she called through the door. "I have ice cream melting in this bag, so you'd better let me in." I opened the door, aware of my unwashed hair and the robe I'd been wearing for 3 days straight. Laura's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her shock. "Well," she said briskly, pushing past me into the house, "looks like I got here just in time." She unpacked groceries, started a pot of coffee, and opened windows to let fresh air into the stale rooms. She didn't press me to talk until Wed settled at my kitchen table with steaming mugs and blueberry muffins she'd baked that morning. "Now," she said, eyes fixed on mine, "tell me what's happened." The whole story spilled out in messy, tearful bursts. Thomas's engagement, the lavish wedding plans, the impossible demand for $40,000, his cruel words, and Stephanie's condescension. Laura listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. That doesn't sound like the Thomas we know." "That's just it," I said. "I don't know who he is anymore. It's like Stephanie has replaced my son with someone else." Laura hesitated, then said carefully, "There are some things you should know. Things I've been seeing but didn't want to tell you." My stomach tightened. "What things?" "Thomas and Stephanie have been around town quite a bit. At Lombardo's last month, the new 5-star restaurant downtown. At the Westfield Country Club, places where dinner for 2 runs hundreds of dollars. But he told me they were too busy to visit, that they were saving for the wedding," I whispered. Laura nodded grimly. "There's more. Thomas has been talking about you to people, not kindly." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What do you mean?" "At Jeff's retirement party last month, Thomas was there with Stephanie. I overheard him telling people you were becoming difficult in your old age, that you were hoarding money while living in squalor." His words, not mine. She looked pained having to repeat it. Each revelation felt like another betrayal. The son who once defended me fiercely to anyone who spoke ill of our modest circumstances was now the one disparaging me. But the worst was yet to come. "And last week," Laura continued reluctantly, "I was at Bella's salon getting my hair done. Stephanie was there with her mother. She didn't see me behind the magazine rack. She was laughing. Emily. Laughing about how your furniture belonged in a garage sale and how you served dinner on chipped plates. She called you the poor little lunch lady. Tears burned in my eyes. Thomas was there too. He didn't defend you. A cold realization washed over me. This wasn't just about the money. This was about shame. Thomas was ashamed of me, of our life together, of everything we'd been through. Laura watched me process this, then asked quietly, "Has Thomas been to your house when you've not been home?" The question startled me. Not that I'm aware of. Why? Because Jennifer's son saw Thomas's car in your driveway last Tuesday. You were volunteering at the library that day, weren't you? I nodded slowly, a new fear taking root. Emily, Laura leaned forward, do you keep financial documents in your house? My stomach dropped. In my home office. In the desk drawer. All my bank statements, retirement information, insurance policies. Laura's expression hardened in a way I'd rarely seen. That's it. We're installing security cameras today. I brought them with me. She reached into one of the bags Shed brought, pulling out a box containing a home security system with 4 cameras. My brother installed these in my house last year, she explained. They connect to your Wi-Fi and send alerts to your phone. You can see who's at your door, who's in your house, everything. I started to protest, but Laura cut me off. Emily, listen to me. The Thomas you raised would never speak to you the way he did. He'd never demand your life savings for a party. He'd never mock you to his fiancée. Something is very wrong here, and I think it's worse than we know. By sunset, we'd installed cameras at my front and back doors, in the living room, and most importantly, one discreetly positioned to monitor my home office. Laura set everything up on my phone, showing me how to access the live feeds and recordings. For days, nothing happened. Then, exactly 1 week after Laura's visit, my phone buzzed while I was grocery shopping. Someone had entered my house. I pulled up the feed with shaking hands. There was Thomas, using his old key to let himself in. He moved with purpose, not the casual demeanor of a son visiting his mother's home. He went straight to my office. I watched, horrified, as he rifled through my desk drawers, pulling out folders and taking photos of documents with his phone. He photographed my bank statements, my retirement account information, even my social security card. When he found my checkbook, he flipped through it, apparently noting all recent transactions. Then he moved to the file cabinet, working his way methodically through each drawer. Finally, he approached the small lockbox on my bookshelf. It contained my will, insurance policies, and the deed to my house. He tried opening it, looking frustrated when he found it locked. After searching unsuccessfully for the key, he put the box under his arm and headed for the door. He was stealing my lockbox. With trembling fingers, I called Laura. Hess taking my personal documents. What do I do? Call him, she said immediately. Let him know you're aware he's there. Don't let on about the cameras yet. I disconnected and called Thomas. Through the security feed, I watched him startle as his phone rang, my name flashing on the screen. Mom? He answered, voice unnaturally high. Thomas? Are you at my house right now? I tried to keep my voice steady. A pause. I just stopped by to pick up some old photos for the wedding slideshow. You weren't home, but I still have my key. The casual lie stunned me. I could literally see him standing in my living room, my lockbox under his arm. Thomas, please put my lockbox back where you found it. Now. His expression on camera shifted from surprise to anger. How did you? The neighbor saw you through the window, I improvised. Please leave everything exactly as you found it, and leave my house immediately. Mom, you're overreacting. I just needed to. Thomas, leave. Now, or I call the police. I watched him slam the lockbox back onto the shelf and storm out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall. After confirming he had driven away, I raced home to assess what had learned from my financial documents. As I pulled up to my house, cold fear settled in my stomach. My son, my only child, had been secretly invading my privacy and studying my finances. The question was, why? The next morning, I called my bank and financial institutions to add extra security to my accounts. I changed my online passwords. I moved my lockbox to a small safe I purchased and bolted to the floor of my bedroom closet. Worst of all, I changed the locks on my doors, something I never imagined doing to keep out my own son. I needed expert advice, so I called Paul Griffin, the financial advisor who had helped me invest my modest savings after Jack died. When I explained what had happened, he immediately scheduled a video call. "Emily," I'm concerned, Paul said. His gray eyebrows furrowed on my computer screen. "Thomas taking photos of your financial information is a serious privacy breach. Given his recent demand for money, this looks like more than curiosity." I nodded, sick at the implication. "What should I do?" "First, we should move your investments to new accounts with enhanced security. Second, you might want to consult an elder law attorney." Paul's expression was grave. "Emily, what you're describing has elements of potential financial exploitation. It happens more often than people realize, even within families." As Paul and I discussed protective measures for my assets, I heard a car door slam outside. Through my window, I saw Thomas striding toward my front door, face tight with anger. "Paul, I have to go. Thomas is here." My voice shook slightly. Paul looked alarmed. "Emily, if you're uncomfortable, don't answer the door. Call me back if you need to." I ended the call, just as Thomas began pounding on my door. "Mom, open up! My key doesn't work," he shouted. I took a steadying breath and opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. "Thomas, this isn't a good time." He pushed against the door. "Why did you change the locks?" His voice was dangerously controlled. "Because you've been entering my home without permission and going through my personal documents," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. His face contorted. "You had no right to call me yesterday. You embarrassed me. I was trying to help you organize your papers." The blatant lie stunned me. "Thomas, I saw you taking photos of my bank statements and attempting to take my lockbox. We both know you weren't organizing anything." For a moment, he looked taken aback, perhaps wondering how I knew exactly what had done. Then his expression hardened. "Let me in, Mom. We need to talk." Something in his tone sent warning signals through my body. "Not today, Thomas. I'm busy." "Is that Paul Griffin?" I heard his voice. His eyes narrowed. "Are you moving your money? Hiding it from me?" My son was unrecognizable to me in that moment, his face twisted with an emotion I couldn't name. Before I could respond, he slammed his shoulder against the door with enough force to break the security chain. I stumbled backward as he burst into my living room. His eyes darted to my computer, where my financial planning spreadsheet was still visible. "I knew it! You're hiding your money. Who are you leaving it to if not your only son?" he shouted. "Thomas, you need to leave now," I said, moving toward my phone on the coffee table. He stepped between me and the phone. "Not until you tell me why you're being so selfish. Is $40,000 really too much to ask? After everything I've done for you?" The absurdity of his statement momentarily took my breath away. "Everything you've done for me?" "Yeah," he sneered. "Who do you think checks on you? Make sure you're not completely alone? You think anyone else cares about a retired lunch lady?" Each word was designed to hurt, to diminish me. "School secretary," I corrected automatically. "And I have friends who care about me. Real friends who don't go through my personal papers when I'm not home." His face flushed. "We need that money, Mom. Stephanie's family is watching, judging. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to measure up to their standards?" I softened slightly, remembering the pressure Head described. "Thomas, I understand it's difficult, but—" "No, you don't understand anything. You live in this dumpy little house with your pathetic little retirement. You've never tried to be anything more." His words sliced through me, but I stood taller. "I raised you by myself after your father died. I put you through college. I worked 3 jobs so you would never feel the poverty I grew up in. Don't you dare say I never tried to be more." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Just tell me, you'll give us the $40,000. Stephanie's father wants an answer by tomorrow." "I can't give you what I don't have, Thomas. My entire savings is $43,000. If I gave you $40,000, it'd have $3,000 to live on for the rest of my life." "Sell the house," he said flatly. "This is my home." I shook my head. "No, take out a loan. At 67 years old on a fixed income, no bank would approve it." "Find a way," he insisted, stepping closer. "You always said you'd do anything for me." I took a step back. "I won't make myself homeless or destitute for a one-day celebration, Thomas. I love you, but no. His face contorted with rage. You don't love me. You never have. You're just a selfish, cheap old woman. He advanced toward me, and for the first time in my life, I felt physically afraid of my child. Thomas, you need to leave now, or I'll call the police. Call the police on your own son? He laughed bitterly. Go ahead. Tell them your successful son asked for help with his wedding, and his pathetic mother refused. I reached again for my phone, but Thomas was faster. He grabbed my wrist with bruising force. Let go of me, I gasped. Not until you listen. He towered over me, his grip tightening. I tried to pull away. You're hurting me. Something snapped in him then. In a motion I could barely track, his free hand formed a fist and connected with my cheekbone. Pain exploded through my face as I fell backward, crashing into the coffee table. You deserve this for being such a selfish, cheap mother, he roared, standing over me. I touched my face, feeling blood from a cut where his class ring had caught my skin. Thomas, please, I whispered, unable to process that my son, my child, had struck me. Instead of showing horror at what had done, Thomas kicked me in the ribs as I tried to get up. For years I've been embarrassed by you, he shouted. The way you dress, this house, everything about you. And now you won't even help me when I need it. Each word hurt more than the physical blows. I curled inward, protecting my body as best I could, wondering if this nightmare would end. Finally, breathing hard, Thomas stepped back. Think about your options, Mom. $40,000, or you don't see me again. Ever. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall and shattered. The sound of his car squealing away echoed through my quiet street. I lay there on my living room floor, bleeding and in pain, trying to reconcile the little boy I'd raised with the man who had just assaulted me. What I didn't know then was that everything the security camera had captured would soon change both our lives in ways I couldn't imagine. I don't know how long I remained curled on my living room floor, my face throbbing and ribs screaming with each breath. The afternoon sun had shifted to evening shadows when I heard knocking at my front door. Emily? It was Betty from next door, her voice concerned. Are you all right? Your door is open. I tried to respond, but only managed a weak groan. I heard Betty's sensible shoes on my hardwood floor, then her sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, Emily! She rushed to my side, her lined face coming into focus above me. What happened? Who did this to you? Thomas, I whispered, the admission bringing fresh tears. Your son did this? Betty looked stunned. I'm calling an ambulance. Then I'm calling the police. No police, I managed. Please, just help me up. Betty, a retired nurse, ignored my protests about both the ambulance and the police. Within minutes, paramedics were assessing me while Betty called Laura. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed what the pain had already told me. A fractured rib, along with severe bruising along my torso. The cut on my cheekbone required 5 stitches, and the dark bruise spreading across my face told the story of the impact to everyone who saw me. Laura arrived as the doctor was finishing with me, her face ashen when she saw my injuries. When the doctor stepped out, she took my hand gently. The police are here, Emily. They need to talk to you. I shook my head, wincing at the movement. I can't report him. Hez my son. Laura's expression hardened. Look at what he did to you. This isn't a son. This is an abuser. Before I could argue further, 2 police officers entered my curtained emergency room area. One was a young man who looked barely older than Thomas had been in college. The other was an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Parker, I'm Officer Reynolds, and this is Officer Chen, she introduced them. We're here about the assault that occurred at your residence today. I remained silent, torn between maternal protection and the reality of my injuries. Officer Reynolds continued gently. Your friend mentioned your son might be responsible. Is that correct? Laura squeezed my hand encouragingly. Yes, I finally admitted. My son, Thomas Parker. He hit me when I wouldn't give him money. The simple statement felt like a betrayal of everything I'd believed about motherhood, about my relationship with Thomas. The officers took my statement methodically, their expressions giving nothing away as I described Thomas's escalating behavior, the demand for wedding money, and finally, the assault itself. Do you have any evidence of the assault? Officer Chen asked. Laura spoke up before I could. There are security cameras, in the living room and at the entrances. She looked at me apologetically. I helped her install them last week. Officer Reynolds nodded. We'd need access to that footage. I closed my eyes, imagining Thomas's face on a police station monitor, his rage and violence documented for strangers to see. Could I really do that to my own child? The hospital social worker, Megan, joined us after the police left with my initial statement. She spoke about resources for elder abuse victims, a term that made me flinch. I wasn't elderly, and Thomas wasn't an abuser. He was my son who had made a terrible mistake, wasn't he? Take some time to think about pressing charges, Megan advised. But know that what happened wasn't your fault, and it wasn't a one-time thing. The financial exploitation, the isolation, the escalation to physical violence, these are classic patterns. I was admitted overnight for observation due to my age and the head injury. In the quiet hospital room, with Laura asleep in the chair beside me, I fell into the darkest grief I'd experienced since Jack died. This was different, though. Jack had been taken from us. Thomas was choosing to become someone I no longer recognized. The next morning, as I was being discharged, my phone began buzzing with texts from acquaintances and former colleagues. Concerned messages asking if I was all right, if the rumors were true. Finally, Laura grabbed my phone and scrolled through my social media. Her face grew increasingly grim. "Emily," she said slowly, "Thomas and Stephanie are telling people you fell in your home because you've been drinking. They're saying you have a problem with alcohol and are now trying to manipulate Thomas for wedding money." The cruelty of it stole my breath. "I've never had more than an occasional glass of wine," I whispered. "I know that," Laura said fiercely. "Everyone who really knows you knows that. But Thomas is getting ahead of the story." She paused, looking at me directly. "And it's working with some people." Over the next few days, recovering at Laura's house since I couldn't manage alone with my injuries, I discovered how effectively Thomas and Stephanie had begun spinning their narrative. Former co-workers who should have known better were questioning whether I'd been hiding a drinking problem. Distant relatives were messaging Thomas with support for dealing with his difficult mother. The isolation I felt was profound. Beyond Laura and Betty, few people reached out directly to me. It seemed easier for many to believe a son over his aging mother, to accept that I'd become a burden rather than a victim. A week after the assault, Laura brought me to a support group at the community center. For elderly parents experiencing family abuse, the flyer read, making me wince again at the classification. I sat silently through most of the meeting, listening to stories that echoed mine with eerie similarity. Adult children demanding money, parents remortgaging homes to help with grandchildren's college or children's business ventures. A 70-year-old man who had given his life savings to his daughter for a down payment on a house, only to find himself unwelcome to visit. After the meeting, a tall, dignified woman with silver hair approached me. "Grace Williams," she introduced herself. "I'm a retired family court judge. Your friend Laura told me a little about your situation." Over coffee in the community center kitchen, I found myself sharing the whole story with this stranger who listened without judgment. "Your son has committed several crimes," she said matter-of-factly when I finished. "Breaking and entering, theft, assault, and now defamation." I stared into my coffee cup. "Hez still my son." Grace reached across the table and tapped my hand to get my attention. "Look at me, Emily. I saw thousands of family cases during my career. What you're feeling, guilt, shame, the need to protect him even now, that's normal. But ask yourself this. If he had done this to anyone else, would you tell that person to just forgive and forget?" I had no answer. "The choice to press charges is yours," Grace continued. "But know this. Consequences now might be the only thing that wakes him up. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our children, even adult children, is to let them face the results of their actions." As I returned to my own home the following day, still moving gingerly with my healing rib, Grace's words echoed in my mind. The security camera footage waited on my phone, unwatched. The police had called twice, asking for my decision about pressing charges. Thomas had not reached out once to apologize or check on my condition. Standing in my living room where it had happened, I finally found the courage to watch the footage. The clinical, unblinking eye of the camera had captured everything. Thomas's rage. His fist connecting with my face, my fall, the kick to my ribs as I lay defenseless, his venomous words as he stood over me. It was undeniable evidence of who had become, or perhaps who he had been becoming for longer than I wanted to admit. With shaking fingers, I called the detective assigned to my case. "I'd like to come in," I told her, "to show you the video, to make a formal statement." As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The son I thought I knew might be lost to me forever. But perhaps the mother he needed now wasn't one who would protect him from consequences, but one who would hold him accountable with both justice and love. The police station was quieter than I expected on a Tuesday morning. Detective Sarah Landry, a woman about my age with shrewd eyes and a compassionate manner, met me in an interview room that looked nothing like the harsh interrogation spaces on television. Laura sat beside me, her steady presence, a comfort as I handed over my phone with the security footage. Detective Landry watched without comment, her expression revealing nothing. When the video ended with Thomas storming out, she looked up at me. "Mrs. Parker, this is clear evidence of assault. Combined with your medical records and statement, we have a solid case." I twisted my hands in my lap. "What happens now?" "If you decide to press charges, we'll issue an arrest warrant." Detective Landry's voice was gentle, but matter-of-fact. "Mr. Parker will be arrested, booked, and will likely face charges of domestic assault and battery." The word arrest made my stomach clench. Would they handcuff him? Would he lose his job? His home? Reading my expression, Detective Landry continued, "Many victims in your situation worry about the consequences for their loved ones. But I need you to understand something." Detective Landry leaned forward. "The assault I just witnessed on that video wasn't a momentary lapse. It was the culmination of escalating abusive behavior, financial exploitation, invasion of privacy, intimidation, and now, physical violence and public defamation." I nodded slowly, remembering Grace's similar assessment. In my 26 years on the force, offenders like this don't stop on their own. They escalate until they face real consequences. After another hour of questions and paperwork, I made my decision. Detective Landry assured me they would handle the arrest discreetly, but warned that once charges were filed, the case would become public record. I returned home feeling both lighter and heavier somehow. I had done the right thing, but at what cost to Thomas? To our relationship? Would he ever forgive me? Would I ever fully forgive him? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, my doorbell rang. When I checked the security camera feed on my phone, I saw 2 police officers at my door, along with a man in a suit who introduced himself as a victim advocate from the district attorney's office. Thomas had been arrested at his workplace that morning. He was currently in custody but would likely make bail by afternoon. They were there to help me secure an order of protection. The process was surreal. A mother taking legal steps to keep her own child away from her. By noon, I had a temporary restraining order stating Thomas could not come within 500 feet of me or my home. When I turned on my computer that evening to distract myself with online crossword puzzles, I was shocked to see my son's face on the local news website. "Marketing executive arrested for assaulting mother," the headline read. The brief article mentioned that Thomas Parker, 32, had been arrested for allegedly assaulting his mother, 67, after she refused to give him money for his wedding. The story spread quickly through our small community. By nightfall, Laura reported that social media was buzzing with the news, opinions divided between shock at Thomas's actions and disbelief that a successful young man would do such a thing. The unexpected twist came the next morning. Thomas's employer, having seen the security footage after it was entered into evidence, terminated his employment immediately. Their company policy had zero tolerance for violence, and the irrefutable evidence left them no choice. Within hours of losing his job, Thomas received another blow. Stephanie and her parents arrived at his apartment while he was meeting with his lawyer. According to the mutual friend who later told Laura, Stephanie returned her engagement ring, announced the wedding was off, and informed Thomas that her father had never really approved of him anyway. She had only been interested in the lifestyle she thought he could provide, and now that his reputation was ruined and his career in jeopardy, she wanted nothing to do with him. I heard all this secondhand, of course. The restraining order meant Thomas couldn't contact me directly. 3 days after his arrest, however, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Parker? This is Jerome Watson. I'm representing your son in his legal matter." The attorney sounded younger than I expected. I gripped the phone tightly. Yes? Thomas has asked me to convey a proposal. He's willing to enter anger management and therapy. In return, he'd like you to consider dropping the charges. My heart raced. Was Thomas truly sorry, or just trying to escape consequences? Mr. Watson, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't a simple misunderstanding. My son seriously injured me and has shown no remorse. The attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Parker, a criminal record would devastate your son's future employment prospects. Surely as his mother, you don't want that. The attempt at manipulation angered me. Mr. Watson, my son devastated his prospects when he chose to punch and kick me for not giving him $40,000. I raised him to take responsibility for his actions. It's time he did exactly that. Please don't call me again. I hung up, shaking but certain. For too long, I'd protected Thomas from the consequences of his increasingly entitled behavior. That protection hadn't helped him grow, it had enabled his worst instincts to flourish. The district attorney called the next day. Based on the evidence, they were charging Thomas with domestic assault, a felony that carried potential jail time. However, given that it was his first offense and I was his mother, they were willing to consider a plea deal that included probation, mandatory counseling, and community service. Do you have an opinion on this approach? The prosecutor asked me. I thought carefully. I don't want my son in jail, but I do want him to get help, to truly understand what he's done, and to make amends not just to me but to society. The prosecutor seemed satisfied with this. I'll let you know what his attorney says. 2 days later, as I was gardening in my backyard, a slow, painful process with my healing ribs, but therapeutic for my wounded spirit, Betty called over the fence. Emily, there's someone here to see you. Says she's Stephanie's mother. Confused and wary, I made my way to the front yard. A perfectly coiffed woman in her 50s stood on my porch, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Mrs. Parker? I'm Catherine Winters, Stephanie's mother. She didn't meet my eyes. May I speak with you? I led her into my living room, acutely aware of how she was assessing my modest home. I want to apologize, she began stiffly, for my daughter's role in what happened to you. I waited silently. We didn't raise Stephanie to be. Catherine searched for words. To value money and status above character, she twisted her diamond wedding ring. When this story broke, when we saw that video, my husband and I were horrified. Not just at what Thomas did, but at how Stephanie had been behaving. What do you mean? I asked. Catherine sighed. Stephanie told us you were refusing to help with the wedding because you were bitter and jealous. That you lived like a miser despite having substantial savings. She convinced Thomas you were selfish and unloving. Catherine looked down at her manicured hands. We believed her. I'm ashamed to say we encouraged Thomas to stand up to you, to not let you manipulate him. The admission stunned me. So you knew about the demand for money? Catherine nodded miserably. Not about the assault, never that. But yes, about the money. Stephanie told us it was customary for the mother of the groom to contribute $40,000. She deliberately misled us about your financial situation. I sat back, processing this new information. Why are you telling me this? Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. And because I want you to know that while we can't undo what's happened, we've taken steps to ensure Stephanie faces consequences too. We've suspended her access to her trust fund until she completes therapy and demonstrates genuine change. No amount of money or social standing justifies what she helped instigate. As Catherine left, I felt an odd sense of closure. Thomas had lost his job and fiancé. Had damaged his reputation and future. Had hurt me deeply, both physically and emotionally. But perhaps, just perhaps, this rock-bottom moment could become the foundation for something new. The next day, Thomas pled guilty to a reduced charge. He would serve no jail time but would be on probation for 2 years. He would complete 6 months of anger management and therapy. He would perform 500 hours of community service working with the elderly, and he would pay restitution for my medical expenses. As he left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and looking nothing like the polished marketing executive had once been, I watched from a distance. Our eyes met briefly across the crowd. In that moment, I saw shame in his gaze, but also something else, something that looked, for the first time in years, like the beginning of awareness. 6 months passed before I saw Thomas again. During that time, my body healed much faster than my heart. The stitches came out, the bruises faded, and my ribs mended until only occasional twinges reminded me of that terrible day. The emotional wounds, however, remained raw. I made changes during those months. With Laura's encouragement, I listed my house for sale not because Thomas had demanded it, but because I realized it held too many painful memories now. To my surprise, the modest home it thought barely marketable sold quickly to a young couple, expecting their first child. With the proceeds, I purchased a comfortable 2-bedroom condo in Cedar Hills, a seniors community with gardens, a community center, and surprisingly lively neighbors. My new home was smaller but filled with only good memories I was creating for myself. I also discovered an unexpected talent. The community center offered art classes, and on a whim, I signed up for watercolor painting. The instructor, Valerie, recognized something in my early awkward attempts and encouraged me to continue. Soon I was teaching basic art to children on weekends, finding healing in their uninhibited creativity. Then came the letter, handwritten on plain stationery, postmarked from a part of the city it never visited. Thomas's familiar handwriting had changed somehow, less confident, more careful. "Dear Mom," he began, and I had to set the letter aside for several moments before continuing. "I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I'm working every day to understand why I became the kind of person who could hurt the one person who always loved me unconditionally." The letter continued, explaining that Thomas was now living in a small studio apartment and working an entry-level customer service job. Had been attending both mandated and additional voluntary therapy sessions. Had joined a support group for people who had committed acts of violence, where he was learning to recognize and manage his anger and entitlement. He didn't ask to see me, didn't try to minimize what Had done. He simply wanted me to know he was trying to become someone worthy of being called my son again someday, if I ever felt safe enough to allow that. I shared the letter with Grace from my support group, who had become a trusted friend and mentor. "What do you think?" I asked her, as we sat in my new sunlit living room. Grace considered carefully. "The letter seems genuine. Hes not making excuses or asking for anything. That's a good sign. I do think it's significant that he's continuing therapy beyond what's required, and that he's accepted the consequences to his career and lifestyle. Those aren't easy things for a young man with his previous sense of entitlement." I nodded, still uncertain. Part of me longed to see Thomas, to know if the son I remembered still existed somewhere inside the stranger had become. Another part remained afraid both of him and of my own capacity for forgiveness. "You don't have to decide anything today," Grace reminded me gently. "Or ever, if that's what feels right. Your only obligation is to your own healing." A week later, I received a call from Thomas's therapist, Dr. Wilson. Thomas had signed a release allowing her to speak with me. "Mrs. Parker, I've been working with Thomas for nearly 6 months now. I'm not calling to advocate for reconciliation," she clarified. "That's entirely your decision. I'm calling because understanding the impact of his actions on you is an important part of Thomas's recovery process. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled therapeutic environment?" After consulting with Grace and my own therapist, I agreed to a mediated session at Dr. Wilson's office. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I waited in the peaceful waiting room with its neutral colors and gentle fountain. When Thomas entered, I barely recognized him. The confident, polished young executive was gone. His designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a button-down shirt. Had lost weight, and a new humility seemed to have replaced his former arrogance. He stopped several feet away, respecting my space. "Mom," he said softly, then corrected himself. "Mrs. Parker. Thank you for coming." In the safe space of Dr. Wilson's office, with her skilled guidance, I finally heard the full story of Thomas's downward spiral. How meeting Stephanie had awakened a dormant shame about his modest upbringing. How her family's wealth had triggered his insecurity. How Had gone into debt trying to belong in their world, then panicked when the wedding plans escalated beyond his means. None of this excused what Had done, and Thomas didn't present it as justification. Instead, he spoke of learning to recognize the warning signs of his anger, the entitlement that had grown unchecked, and the ways Had rationalized increasingly unacceptable behavior. "I wanted to be someone else," he admitted. someone who hadn't grown up in a small house with secondhand clothes, someone who hadn't watched his father die on a baseball field, someone whose mother didn't work serving lunch to other people's children. He looked down at his hands. I was ashamed of where I came from, of who we were, and that shame turned into resentment, then anger, then rage. Dr. Wilson guided us through a difficult but healing conversation. I shared how his actions had affected me not just physically but emotionally, the betrayal, the public humiliation, the destruction of my trust. By the end of our 2-hour session, I didn't feel ready for reconciliation, but I did feel something I hadn't expected: understanding. Not excusing, but understanding. Over the next few months, Thomas and I met several more times in Dr. Wilson's office. Gradually, cautiously, we began rebuilding not the relationship we'd had before, but something new based on clearer boundaries and more honest communication. Thomas completed his community service hours working with elderly residents in a nursing home, an experience he said had profoundly changed his perspective. He continued his therapy long after the court mandate expired. He found a new job with a small marketing firm, not as prestigious as his former position, but honest work that he approached with new humility. 1 year after the assault, I invited Thomas to visit my new home for the first time. He arrived with a small potted plant and visible nervousness. "This is nice, Mom," he said, looking around the bright space I'd created. "It suits you." "I think so too," I replied, realizing I meant it. The smaller home felt more like me than the house filled with old memories ever had. Our relationship remained fragile, a work in progress. Thomas understood there were consequences that couldn't be undone. Trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt slowly, if at all. Meanwhile, my own life blossomed in unexpected ways. My watercolor classes expanded to 2 community centers. I formed new friendships with my neighbors, vibrant women with their own complex life stories. I even began dating Arthur, a kind widower who taught astronomy at the community college and made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. Most surprisingly, I established a small foundation called Breaking the Cycle, which provided resources and support for elderly parents experiencing abuse from adult children. The story I'd once been ashamed to tell became a beacon for others suffering in silence. At a fundraising event for the foundation, I found myself at the podium sharing my journey. As I spoke, I noticed Thomas standing at the back of the room. I hadn't invited him had come on his own. He made no attempt to approach me or draw attention to himself. He simply listened, bearing witness to both the pain he'd caused and the healing that had followed. When the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Thomas remained. Only then did he approach, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said simply. "What you're doing here, it matters." I nodded, acknowledging both the compliment and the long road we'd traveled to reach this moment of genuine respect. Thomas wasn't the son I'd raised him to be yet. Maybe he never would be entirely. But he was working to become a better man than the one who had struck me down that day. And I had become someone stronger than the woman who had lain bleeding on her living room floor. As we walked together to the parking lot, maintaining a comfortable distance, I reflected on what this journey had taught me. That love without boundaries isn't really love at all. That enabling someone else's worst instincts isn't helping them. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And that sometimes the most painful endings can lead to the most unexpected new beginnings. What do you think, dear listener? Have you ever had to draw difficult boundaries with someone you love? Have you experienced the painful growth that comes from standing up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening. And remember, each difficult moment in your journey isn't the end of your story, it's just the beginning of a new chapter.